about the flooding in my state. We talked about this at your confirmation hearings back in 2019, the Missouri flooding in the central and northwestern part, really actually all along the Missouri and Mississippi rivers, but particularly serious flooding in the central and northwest parts of the state. And we talked at that time, as you probably remember, about the problems with responsiveness and delays that many Missourians encountered, particularly as it relates to the individual assistance program. So I wanted to follow up on this. You said in response to our conversation that FEMA has a strategic goal of reducing the complexity of the agency and that you would work to streamline this process, particularly the awards of IA to the best of your ability. So can you just give us an update on progress you have made related to that goal, particularly as it relates to individual assistance?
Yes, sir. Specifically, we have done a couple of things. One, we have taken a look at our policy and we have adjusted our policy to make sure that we are understanding the barriers that individuals have to accessing our programs, like being able to prove home ownership or occupancy for renters when they don't have the exact paperwork that FEMA has required in the past. We've seen a significant improvement in the number of individuals that have now been eligible for individual assistance as part of that policy change. But I think more specifically to your point, and one of the things that we are doing is I have directed the team to make sure that we are taking our services to people instead of forcing them to figure out how to navigate our system. And so one of the other things that we put in place last year was that anybody who still doesn't meet the requirements within our computer system, we are actually doing a 100% call back to talk to them and ask them and go through their case with them so we can better understand or explain to them the type of information so we can get those approved. We've seen a tremendous amount of, again, more individuals approved through this process. There are still some that don't meet our requirements, but we've continued to see improvements. And instead of forcing them to try to navigate our system and appeal, we're coming to them.
That's great. That's encouraging. Can you give me an update on other steps you've taken with regard to communication and responsiveness, which is what you're getting at there, I think, in the second part of your answer? What else are you doing in terms of proactive communication to folks? Alerting them as to what FEMA's doing, alerting them to what assistance they may be eligible for, alerting them to the process and how they can apply, when they can expect answers, and so on. Give me a sense of what you're doing there.
Yeah, I think there's a few things that we have added into the way that we're trying to do outreach into communities. First, we've always had our disaster survivor assistance teams, and what we are doing now, though, is we are using data to look at where the damage has been and where we have low levels of registrations. And these are teams that can go out into the community and register them right from their iPad. And so we're targeting where they're going. The second thing that we're doing is through our external affairs and our public affairs division is just doing more outreach to local media and trying to make sure we understand the demographics of a community and using the media that they're used to listening to. And so we're doing a much broader outreach on different types of media platforms to try to get to people on how they get information.
Any obstacles that you've encountered so far along the way in terms of improving responsiveness, also improving communications? I mean, have you experienced challenges that you've been able to overcome? I'm just curious what you've found as you've gotten on the ground, so to speak, in the agency.
I mean, honestly, I think some of the biggest obstacles are just getting out of our own way so we can make the necessary changes that need to happen to help people. And when we come into this with a different mindset of putting people first, then we're able to make a lot of different changes to really help the people that have been impacted in these communities.
Good. Let me ask you about something that FEMA announced earlier this year, February, to be exact, February 22nd, the new Equity Action Plan. That plan says that FEMA's goals include generating a FEMA-wide definition of equity and a framework for implementing equity in all agency programs. And I've got the definition of equity in front of me. It's pretty long. It's 89 words, references skin color, references sexual orientation. And I also noticed in your written testimony, you list as your first priority instilling equity as a foundation of emergency management. What does that mean exactly?
So what that means to me, Senator Hawley, is the fact that we have a lot of individuals that have barriers to accessing our programs. And so my focus, just like I talked about with the Individual Assistance Program, is better understanding those barriers and targeting our assistance to help communities that have had difficulty navigating our programs, whether that is our Individual Assistance Program or our grant programs. We want to be able to help those communities understand better the services that we can provide so we can help them achieve the resilience that they need to for the different threats that we're facing in the future.
So I'm trying to understand, I guess, the aims of the program and the scope of it, because it sounds like it's important if it's your first priority. Is the aim to better deliver FEMA's services and to improve responsiveness to folks who have been affected by a disaster, or is the aim to internally change the makeup of FEMA? Because you also write that FEMA's Office of Equal Rights is now collecting data on various internal categories to actively build, I'm quoting now, actively build a robust civil rights program by recruiting and hiring experienced civil rights subject matter experts in the OER, the Office of Equal Rights. So I'm trying to figure out what the priority is here.
It's actually both, right? So equity is my #1 priority in the strategic plan, and each of the objectives within my priorities, one focuses externally on how we deliver our services to communities, one focuses internally on how our workforce is going to support that, and another one talks about how we partner with other stakeholders in order to deliver our programs. And so in this case, for me, on the delivering services to our programs, my goal is to not have a one-size-fits-all approach, right? To better understand that every individual experiences a disaster differently, every community experiences a disaster differently, and we want to be able to understand their unique situation to make the decisions on how we deliver our programs and not use the same criteria for a large urban area as we use for a small rural community.
Does your Office of Equal Rights, is this different from a diversity, inclusion, equity office? Is there something different about it?
I don't have a separate diversity, equity, and inclusion office. My Office of Equal Rights
That's what it does.
deals with the civil rights complaints or civil rights issues as required by law. We have an equity enterprise steering group that's made up of leadership from across my agency to talk more broadly about the culture of FEMA and the diversity of FEMA and how we can improve that.
And finally, do you consider an individual's race or gender when making hiring decisions, Administrator?
We do not. We base it on qualifications.
Yeah, good. Well, thank you for what you're doing in terms of improving responsiveness. And I would just hope that in terms of your priorities, I hope that emergency management and disaster responsiveness would always be your #1 top priority, serving and responding to people in need. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.